Let's check this record out. I picked this up the other day at a thrift store for $1. Hit the sampling button on your Maschine hardware and use the navigation arrows to head over to the second tab. Using detect mode, we will set the threshold just above the noise that the record player is making. When we hit start on Maschine, it won't actually start recording until the volume crosses this threshold. It's a good idea and a good practice to record more of the audio than you think you will use.
I think we made it. We got to celebrate. Took a long, long time, y'all. We got to celebrate. So we wrote the song just for you.
Okay, let's head on over to the edit page. And real quick, let's set the polyphony to 1 so that the sample will cut itself off and not play multiple versions of itself at the same time. Usually, a good place to start is going to be making what we call a perfect loop of either 2, 4, 8, or 16 bars. And of course, the best place to start a loop is always on the downbeat or on the 1.
I think we made it.
On the Maschine hardware, you can use the 5th knob to zoom in and the 6th knob to scroll around once you are zoomed in.
I think we made it.
Using the zoom feature, you can get very detailed and very exact as to where your start point is. This sample happens to have a double kick, and the second kick is actually the 1.
I think we made it. I think we made it.
Now that we have established our start point, let's zoom out and see if we can't figure out where our end point should be. And leave a comment below if you have trouble counting beats or counting bars, and I will try to make you a video to help you out. Basically, we want to crop this into an amount of time that makes sense. If you are using quarter notes to slice up your samples, then 4 bars works out perfectly across 16 pads. What you want to do is adjust the endpoint to just before the 1 of the section that you are not going to be using.
And knowing is half the battle.
There, let's give that a try.
I think we made it. We got to celebrate.
Now, before we truncate, there's one more thing that I like to do, and that is just to make a copy of the file, just in case I need it or if anything goes wrong. So I like to just save it to an empty pad that I'm not using. And then I will just go ahead and mute the pad.
The noise!
Okay, let's go ahead and truncate the sample. And voila, this is our new sample. And Maschine seems to not be playing my whole sample. And if this ever happens to you, be sure to set your sample to a one-shot. There we go. Now we're playing the whole sample.
We got to celebrate.
Okay, so let's stretch this thing. From your Maschine hardware, select sampling, and then select stretch, and then go into the settings tab. Maschine will try to guess the BPM of your sample, which is fine most of the time as long as it's close, but sometimes it's really not even close. Let's use the tap tempo feature to figure out whether or not Maschine was even in the ballpark of the actual tempo.
I'm not gonna try it, you try.
Okay, we came up with 113 to 114 range, and Maschine was calling it about 119. I'd say that's probably close enough to go with. Okay, let's use the tap tempo again to set the project tempo to something that we would like to use. Okay, so let's go ahead and stretch the sample, but we have a small problem in that on our stretch screen, Maschine has defaulted the BPM to the old BPM from before us using the tap tempo to set the project tempo. The workaround is to go out of the sample page and then back into it. This will reset the new BPM for stretching. And there we go. Let's hit apply. Okay, let's get to chopping this thing. Or it is also referred to as slicing in the Maschine universe. Now, manual is my favorite mode, but there is also slicing by grid, where Maschine will divide it up into equal slices, and you can tell Maschine how many slices you would like. Very similarly, there is split mode, which is pretty much the same thing.
Here is
And after that, there is detect mode, which is actually really dope if you're splitting up something like a drum break or something very transient heavy. But in this case, we are going to use my favorite mode, which is manual. And we are going to select this option, which will remove all the slices. Now, a technique that I like to use most of the time when I'm chopping up my samples is to play a drum beat while I'm chopping the samples. I prefer this much more than using a metronome. And so we can just have the drum beat playing and looping in the background as we slice up each one of the chops. When you hit the first pad, it will start recording on that pad, and it will continue recording on that pad until you hit the next one. And of course, the same is true of each consecutive pad. And there we go, 16 pads ready with new sample chops. But before we apply this to the pads and make them permanent, let's change one of the settings. Scroll over a couple pages from the Slice tab, and let's make the pattern None. Okay, we are now ready to hit Apply. But I prefer not to put the slices on a single pad. Instead, what I like to do is apply them to a group. And now that the group is blinking, we can hit OK. And now all the chops are actually on their own individual pads. And if we head back over to the edit page, we can actually still edit all of them. So from here, we can zoom on in and edit the exact placements of all our start and end points. The main thing that you want to look out for and be aware of during this process is to ensure that there is no popping either at the beginning or at the end of each sample chop. But I don't want to bore you with this entire process. Once you have seen one pad done, you've kind of seen them all. So let's go ahead and move this along. Okay, let's check that and see how we did.
I think we made it. We got to celebrate.
Yeah, I think that's going to work just fine. And yet somehow, we still have a tiny problem with these chops. They're not cutting each other off like they're supposed to.
That's it. No more.
So our solution for this is first to select all the pads by hitting select and all, and then changing the polyphony of all our pads to 1.
Damn, y'all feel that?
There we go. Now all the pads cut themselves off like they should. And after completing that, make sure that you go back and select none, so any further edits won't be affecting everything. And from here, we can look at and start messing with some of the other settings within Machine's sampler. And it's a good idea within your Machine software to also pull up the mixer view. This will allow you to see all the dials and parameters within Machine's sampler. And now we can start tweaking things like the sample chops bits and sample rate. And this will take away some of its fidelity, but also add a lot of crunch and bite. Now we can also start messing with things like the compression and the drive. Now the compressor has automatic makeup gain, and the drive adds a lot of volume. So you may need to adjust your volume in the mixer. Reverse is a very simple and effective way to affect some of your slices. Using the pitch adjustment is also a very fun way to affect your sample, but be aware that this affects the timing and the length of the slice. If you pitch up the sample by 12 semitones, it'll actually still be the same note, just an octave higher, but the sample chop will also play in half the time. Conversely, if you pitch it down by 12 semitones, it'll take twice as long to play, down by 24 semitones, and it will take 4 times as long to play. For a crazy effect, you can mess with automating the pitch dial while recording. For now, let's return some of these settings back to their starting point. And let's tab over to our lo-fi settings, and let's see if we can't make this a little bit grimy. By increasing the sample rate and the bits dials, you are actually decreasing the sample rate and the bits. These settings, used in conjunction with the compressor and the drive, make for a not so subtle effect on your sample chop. So I have gone through and edited each one of my chops to a degree that suits me, some having more bit reduction than others, and a few even being reversed. Keep in mind that you can also do things like adding individual effects to each pad. Remember, as you make your way through your sampling journey, to keep things simple, to keep things musical, and to always keep things fun. Remember that life is a journey, and that life is a process. Over time, you will figure out what your sampling ear is tuned to, and what methods and techniques suit your individual style. Keep in mind that while most of us tend to lean towards being competitive in our creative space, the only thing that we should truly be competing against are ourselves. Have I learned and have I grown from what I've known yesterday? Have I given myself the building blocks to continue growing in the future? And most importantly, is this shit still fun? Because it needs to be fun. And y'all remember, until I talk to you next time, treat all you people really well, because life is short. Have a good one.